Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Okay, you're small but mighty, so let's show that. I have a quick question, and I'm hoping someone knows the answer to it. Do you have any idea how many federal employees are in the United States? Any idea? 1 million. Okay, up that? 2. Yes, exactly. There are 2 million full-time federal employees in the United States. This actually excludes the post office. So imagine that number to be even bigger. Within the state of Virginia, as of mid-2017, last year, that number was 178,000. And we're lucky enough today to have a panel of federal employees. So chances are that you in your lifetime, you know someone who works in the federal government, or if you don't know anyone, well, you definitely know someone as of today, because I expect you all to stay after the panel and network with our panelists. But at this time, I want to turn our attention to the panel, and I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves very briefly, and then give one word that you would use to describe your job. So introduce yourself, and then one word to describe your job. We'll start with Shantae.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shantae Barber. I graduated from Mason in early 2000 and a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing and a minor in information technology. Afterwards, I start working at GSA. So I have been with GSA for 14 years in different positions. Within GSA, I also obtained my MBA from Marymount University. And without anything else?
No, just your word.
Well, right now I'm a senior marketing research analyst, but technically it's a senior data analysis analyst. So basically, I guess the one word I can say is data. I mean, every day I'm looking at different trends, data, so numbers right now is my life.
Okay, great.
Hi, my name's Dan Cluxton. I am a senior project engineer with the Naval Surface Warfare Center Carter Rock Division. I've been there for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was with the Military Sea Lift Command, command under the Department of the Navy for 15 years. I am a 2014 George Mason TechMan alum, and I got my undergrad at the University, or the Kings Point, the Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point in 1992. The one word I would have is unpredictable. We do a lot of different things on a daily basis.
Cool.
Hello, I'm Brock Walker, a 2014 graduate of the MBA program at George Mason. I spent 6.5 years at the Department of Treasury and a bunch of finance roles, mainly in shared services, so managing a $250 million portfolio for about 50 different federal agencies through Treasury. I'm currently doing 2 roles at the FDIC. I've been there for about a year, so I serve as the special assistant to one of our deputy directors. We're responsible for taking over failed banks in the United States. And then I'm also helping set up an innovation lab in the division. It's the first ever innovation lab at FDIC, so we're working to try to figure that out. The word that I would use is variety. In both roles, it's trying to figure things out, trying to connect the dots, trying to connect people and ideas. There's zero structure. Every day is different, and it's kind of what I make out of it. So it's trying to piece that puzzle together.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather. I graduated from Mason with a bachelor's in accounting and then management in 2011. From there, I went on to work with FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, also with the Department of Treasury. I did that for several years and then moved to DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration. There I do pathways and student interns. So the one word to describe my job would probably be pathways or be students. That's all I deal with every day.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Miller. I graduated from Missouri State University in 1987. So I've worked for my organization, Unicor Federal Prison Industries, since 1991, since probably before any of you were born. Unicor is a unique government program. We are not a company. We are a correctional program within the federal prison system that operates factories that are on the federal prison campuses where the inmates work and create products that are then are sold back to the federal government. It's a very unique sort of federal operation, and that's what we're here to talk about, because when people think about working for the government, they often don't think about working for an organization like this. And my word would be a bit of a hybrid. We would call it life-changing, because that's what Unicor does. It really does make an impact on the lives of inmates and their families.
Hi, my name is Ann Kale. I'm a senior manager at Carney & Company. I'm the only person on today's panel that is not a federal employee. Carney & Company is a private firm, but we work exclusively with the federal government. So I'm here representing the other side of the coin, the government contracting side. We do federal financial statement audits, federal consulting, really anything financial in nature that the government needs. I'm a 2010 graduate of George Mason, the School of Business, just like you guys. And I would say my one word is diverse. We work with every federal agency, and they're all really different. So we have GSA here, we have DEA here, we have the Bureau of Prisons here, and we go and we visit all of them, and so we get to see all of the different things that your federal government does for you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Very good words. Okay. So to go ahead and kick off the panel, I want to ask a question, and anyone, you can just go down the line or whoever wants to answer it. How did you choose your work in the federal government space?
So I actually had never considered government work at all. I was a student in Wisconsin, and it was right around the time of Snowmageddon. We came out here for a finance competition at the Reagan Building, and we won the competition. It was a group of 4 of us. The deputy CFO approached me at the competition and gave me his business card, and I just followed up with him when I landed. So I flew back that night. It was like 2 in the morning, and I sent him my resume, and I was so excited that I called him at 7 a.m. the next day, which is Sunday, and just like, hey, I sent you my resume. Please let me know if you have any questions. Turned out he was a military guy and liked my punctuality, and I had a job offer in like 3 days. So just like really, really fast. And I had a private sector offer, and that was the first time that I had ever considered not going private. So it was just kind of an unexpected thing.
So I had a little story with mine, is that basically, as a student here, I was working in career services, and I noticed there was a job for GSA as a contracting specialist. So I applied, and voila, I got it. So please use your resources at Mason. It does work. So I started off as a contracting specialist, and it was within an intern program they had. So it was an intern program for 4 years, and it was a step increase, or a grade increase that you get. You start at a certain grade level, and then every year, based on your performance, you would get the next grade level. So I was really enjoying that. And I realized that, like Brock, when I first started, I didn't know if I really wanted to work for the federal government. I thought it was going to be really political and, wearing suits and stuff like that. But then I realized that I really am giving back to the community. Like, by the work that I'm doing as a contracting specialist, I'm helping other agencies to fulfill their mission and goals. So I realized, wow, my work is being valued, and I think that was important to me. So within so after I finished the program, I wanted to be in my field, my major field. So that was marketing. So by networking with people within GSA, I put my name out there, talk to people, and then a position opened up in the Office of Marketing. So that's how I was able to get into marketing. And within that, I first started off as a communication specialist. So I was doing different ads, advertisement, radio ads, and then from there, I transfer over to research, which is where I'm at now. So basically, user resources and network.
Good.
I had worked in the private sector for several years out of college. And quite frankly, I was tired of working in companies where they seem to just kind of squeeze the life and resources out of you while a boss got rich. And I wanted to work somewhere that made a difference, that actually made an impact, that helped society, kind of like a couple of the other panelists. And so that's why I went to the federal government. I also really liked the salary structure, the benefits, the stability of it, because the job market back then, like it is now, is a little bit shaky, and so it became a good fit. And then when I became a part of the Unicor team, then I was finally working in a job that actually really made an impact on society, and you got to have all the interesting parts of being in the business world, advertising, customer development, product development, things like that. At the same time, you're working with the government and some of the advantages that has as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So my story is very different. Being a student at Mason, I actually got in the government when I was a student. I joined the business fraternity Delta Sigma Pi, who is co-ed here on campus, and then put together an event called Business Fest. It's an event that still goes on in February if you guys want to attend it next year. But there I met FinCEN, and they really kind of got me involved into the mission, and the mission was incredible. Financial crimes on a global scale, who could go wrong? So I got the internship with that and then moved on, stayed with FinCEN for several years and then moved on to the government. But I would say that with the government, they do have very, very impactful missions.
I have a similar story to Mark, I guess a little bit. I spent the first 10 years of my career as a government contractor, and I felt the work that we got was just kind of almost what the government didn't want to do. They just kind of gave us little bits and pieces of projects, and I never got the full kind of scope of things. So when I transitioned, that was the big thing for me. I was able to kind of take a project, and I was able to kind of see it to the end, and it was the start to finish for me, and it was from a career perspective and an engineering perspective much more fulfilling for me from that aspect. As the contractor, you only seem to get little bits and pieces, and they seem to kind of use you up and kind of chew you out at the end. So it took me a while. I had a lot of contacts in the government that tried to get me to go, and I was, to be honest, a little resistant. But when I finally made the transition, it was the best career decision I have certainly made.
Wow.
And I would encourage you all to think about that as you think about your careers, because the number one thing most people ask you about is salary, but what you do and what it means matters a lot too, especially as you get a little further down your career road.
Cool. And Anne, I'd like for you to tell us too, what made you join Kearney and Company?
I majored in accounting, and I hated my tax class. I don't know if you guys are accounting majors, but I still feel a little bit of PTSD from that. So on the government contracting side, we don't do any taxes. We do financial statement prep. We write financial policy. We do financial statement audits. We do audit readiness. Really runs the gamut, but the one thing we don't do is tax, and that was really appealing to me. I also I think the work-life balance is a little bit better because we don't have a tax season, so we don't have the same busy season that a lot of commercial accounting firms have. So the work-life balance was really appealing to me.
Great. Okay. So real quick, before I have my next question, I want to stop and see if the audience has any questions about the discussion that we just had. Yes.
A lot of you guys mentioned like switching from private to the public sector. How does the private sector look after working with the federal government for a while? Like, how does that change your perspective of the private sector getting in?
In what way? I tell you what, I work with a lot of private sector partners. I wouldn't trade. I like our pay schedule. I like our work hours, our work-life balance. I like our retirement programs. Federal government's the best company in the world, guys. If you can, don't just not consider it. It's the pay is very good, and the work-life balance and the benefits, and so I wouldn't trade with any of the private sector people I know that I compare notes with.
Yeah, I'd like to second what Mark said again. I still work with a lot of government contractors. I still have a lot of friends. My old boss from 20 years ago is still at the same company, and that suits what he wants. But the switch for me for the federal government was, the pay is great, the benefits are great, but for me, from what I wanted at that time, it was much more of a kind of fulfilling work week and what I was doing at the end. but we still use them, and they still benefit. And I look back, and I'm glad I started in the government contracting world. From my career development, it gave me that perspective and that. For me, that work ethic, you have to work hard on the government contracting side in my industry to really kind of get and move and advance. And I've kind of continued that through my federal, government career, and it's aided me really well. So again, I looking back, it was a great move at that point. I have no ill will towards it, but I'm glad I made the switch.
Can I say something real quick? And I just want to add to one thing I like about the federal government is that I see it as a big organization, right? Because I work for GSA, but if I want to go to Treasury or FDIC, I can't. You just apply. It's an easy transfer because I already have my service in. Compared to if you start off in one company, you go to another company, it's just an easy transition, So that's one thing I like about the federal government because there's so many different organizations to try out to do something different, but I'm still within the federal government. However, another caveat is being a federal employee, I feel like, we have to, with any position, you have to stay ethical, right? But even outside your personal life, you still have to put that, I'm a federal employee, so what's being done, you don't want it to be, I'm not saying it's going to be broadcast in the news, but wherever we do, you're a federal employee, so you just have to just be, I'm saying be careful. I want to use the right word, but you just have to, yeah. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I want to kind of go into your question a little bit deeper because when I work with students all the time on the whole federal process, they go to USA Jobs and you get very confused. How many people in here have been to USA Jobs before? Website. Okay. You get very confused because it kind of looks convoluted. You're not sure what to do. I think to speak to your question a little bit, how do you get in to federal service and how long does it take? What's the entire process like?
So I'm the one from HR. To get into the government, yes, it can be easy in some cases. In some cases, it can be hard. I would say the best way to get in is through internship opportunities, especially as a student. So go to USA Jobs, search pathways. That would be the first one. Put in Washington, D.C. area, obviously. And you can even set reminders and alerts through USA Jobs for different agencies and different pathway positions opening up. But apply. Don't not apply. But as soon as you say you get hired into the federal government, the process moving forward can be a very long process, especially if you're in an agency that requires some sort of clearance, like a secret or a top secret. The whole pre-employment process can be up to a year to 2 years. So, just start with USA Jobs, apply to different positions. There should be a phone number or email contact on every single vacancy announcement out there. So if you do have questions, you can always reach out to them.
So I just echo that. I used to hire interns all the time at Treasury and loved having them come in. It's the easiest way to get your foot in the door. So if you're at all interested in government, it's just a quick sneak peek of what it could be like. You can always just not continue, or when the internship ends, you're done. But if you do good and you like it, it gets people to know who you are, and it helps because then it can unlock some doors where they can open things up specifically for the experience that you've gained during your internship. So you can actually get a little bit of a leg up. It helps you open that door wider. And it's kind of goes back to what Shantae was saying about networking. Every person on this panel that I've just met today, and I know at least one person that works with them. And it's just from talking for a minute. When you start getting these connections, it will help open doors, aside from just knowing whether or not you like what that job would be.
And I just want to echo what they both said. Apply. It can be difficult to get started in the federal government. An internship is often a very good way to get in the door. But even if it's an internship or you just want to hire just into a straight job, apply all the time. Just make it part of your routine. It's Thursday. On Thursdays, I apply for a job. On Thursdays, I look at USA Jobs and I put in for something. And it may take 6 months. It may take longer. But like Heather said, apply, apply, apply. And I want to put this in your ear. If you're going to work for the federal government, though, you're going to have to pass some background checks. You're going to have to pass a drug test. Keep that in mind. Much of what you do isn't going to disqualify you as you start thinking about what you like to do. But just start thinking about, if I want to be a federal employee, I need to start making some changes now. So keep that in mind, because there are going to be some things you're going to have to be asked about.
Great. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about that, what you just talked about, background checks, security clearances, and all that good stuff. Anybody familiar with the security clearance process? Heather, talk a little bit to our students about that.
Okay. So the security clearance process can last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on the investigation being done. Say it's either like a public trust, a secret clearance, or a top secret clearance, more than likely in the government. A public trust is a kind of simple background check. A secret is a little more in depth, where you're going to have to fill out, it's called EQIP. You're going to fill out a bunch of forms, give your entire life's information for the last 5 years, relatives, neighbors, everywhere you've ever traveled, people you've known your entire life, you name it. It takes like 5 hours to fill out. But that is for like a secret and a top secret. From there, secret background investigation isn't as in-depth, but then you have the top secret where they'll actually, people will actually go out and walk your neighborhood and interview your neighbors or talk to your friends. And they'll do a full investigation on you, and they'll find everything, trust me. Don't even try to hide it, because if you hide it, you'll lose the opportunity. So be upfront. Just be upfront. But the whole process can take 6 months to 2 years.
And make sure the names that you provide on your, security check are people that you can trust that would definitely respond back, because what happens is they will call that person, right? And if that person doesn't reply back, then that's going to take more time. So make sure the person that you give as like a reference or whatever that they need to check with is someone that you can trust, and that someone knows that will be a good person to follow up with them. For me, I have the public trust one. And I think that's every 10 years or so that they renew it. So they will call back those people, and for yourself too, just be on top of it, you all. And this mouse, I don't want to scare you all, but oh my gosh, this seems like a lot. But the benefits, and I cannot stress this enough, the benefits that you get from being a, federal employee outweighs all these paperworks, okay? Like the work-life balance, someone mentioned that. It's great, y'all. I telework like 3 days out of the week. I only go into office Wednesday and Thursday. So that's my work balance right there. The leadership development programs that they have. So once again, the benefit will outweigh the paperworks.
And one last word about background investigations. I don't want to scare anybody if you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, so much for my idea of a government job, because they're going to be asking me questions and I'll answer them, and then they're going to throw my application in the trash. They know what people tend to do. They know what is common in college years. That's fine. Just if you're going to be a federal employee and you're going to have that in your career path, stop now. And then answer the questions honestly when they come across, and you'll probably be okay. But don't be discouraged if you start thinking about anything you've been involved in. Just start thinking from now on.
I was just going to add one really quick thing. So public trust is like the base level. Like that's what I have. I haven't had to go through this crazy investigation thing because I haven't done that. But I've been in government for like 8 years, and no one's interviewing my neighbors. So I saw some faces of like, oh man, there are some basic background checks where it's not so in-depth, and there's a lot of positions to do that. And any of the paperwork is going to be normal for any job that you go through. The government just may have a little bit more forms, and there are benefits to doing it, so don't get discouraged by the paper.
That's any jobs.
Yeah, I have a secret clearance, so I have done EQIP. It's not hard. It's just kind of lengthy, and it just kind of makes you kind of look back and go, oh my gosh, where did I go on vacation, 4 years ago? But again, just the application process and the paperwork, you have to be patient. There are a lot of things in the government that move really quickly and unpredictable in my job, and it's a daily kind of thing. And there are a lot of things like the paperwork that go really slowly, and you just kind of have to be patient with the application process and the clearance process. If you're patient, you get through it, and then it's behind you, and you don't have to worry about it again.
So one thing I will say from the government contracting side, getting your clearance young is easier because you have a shorter history. The more mature you are in your career, the more questions you're going to have to answer, the more years you're going to have to account for. It's a lot easier to get your clearance now than later, and it's really, really beneficial on the job market. I changed jobs about 3 years ago, and that was the first question they asked me. Do you have an active clearance? Boom. Okay, well then they're going to take me a little bit more seriously because I have one. So it's definitely a competitive edge.
Very good. Yes. And just also keep in mind that it's also really agencies are more turning toward a holistic process because, like our panelists said, you're all human and you make mistakes. You do different things. Just be very honest with whatever it is that you've done. Question?
Question for Ann. Did you say, I don't understand, get the clearance now or try to get the clearance before you apply for the job?
So you can't get a clearance until you're in a position that's going to require a clearance because your federal agency will sponsor you or the company that you're applying for will sponsor it. The point is just that earlier in your career is better because you're going to have less years to account for.
Good. Follow-up question to that. An adult student like me attending Mason, interested, said, I'm convinced with what you guys have said. I'm interested. I want to get into the federal government. Never been. Long time by line. How hard, how difficult that process would be for
I don't think I think the process will be the same, honestly, for everyone. It's just, like, through the clearance process, you just may have more years to account for. And may have to go back more years, find information, addresses, phone numbers on more people. That's the only difference, really. Between being a student and being an adult. That's it.
And I should make sure there's no criminal thing in my record, correct?
Yeah. I mean, if there is, you can talk to them about it, depending on what it is. Little things like traffic tickets, that's not going to matter. Felonies, that's a whole different story.
Okay, great. Next.
So if you have a relative who has a felony, previously, how will that affect your ability to get clearance?
It wouldn't affect you in our agency, and we're the Bureau of Prisons. As long as you're not involved in what your relative did, you can't control your family. And I have a relative in prison. He's not in our particular system, but I think that's common. Everybody's read the statistics. But you can't control what your family does as long as you're not involved in it. You might be questioned about they may ask you if you have anybody, and you just explain it and tell it to them. But no, that wouldn't disqualify you.
Any other questions?
Yes. So in other words, if I'm interviewing with the federal government, just like the IRS or INS, because I've dealt with INS before, even though there's something there, they don't ask it, I need to make sure I let them know before they ask it. Because I remember, I'll give you one example. When I sponsored my family, brought them to this country, dealing with the INS,
Can I just stop you right there? Because that's more of a personal question.
Oh.
I would suggest afterwards, if you want to speak with one of our panelists, it might be a little bit better.
No,
Is that okay?
yes.
Perfect. Great. Any other questions that are relevant to everyone in the room? Yes, sir.
So how many people do they review for your clearance, like your family member or close friends? Like how many?
So I'm going to say it depends on the clearance level. A public trust, they may not interview anyone. Same with the secret, they may just send out forms. With the top secret, it can be 10. It could be they're going to interview your entire family, like your parents, your siblings, at least your immediate family. They will probably interview your neighbors for a top secret. And then they'll interview the people that you put on there for friends, and they may interview other people that your friends give them. So it could vary for every single person, to be honest.
Okay, so that was the last question for security clearances, because I would like to move on. What other questions do you have that are not about security clearances? What? Nothing. Okay, well, I have a few. So I want to come back to the words that I had you each mention during your introduction. Shantae, you talked about data. Specifically, what do you deal with the GSA that you can tell us about?
Okay, well, how many of you all have heard of GSA, General Services Administration? Hands up. Okay, great. For those who, this is, agency is new, basically, I like to say that we are basically the landlord of federal buildings. So most of all these, buildings, people here, we own the buildings. We also, you can say, quote unquote, we're the Target or Walmart of the federal government because we provide supplies and services to other agencies. So our goal is provide, like if it's paper or IT support, we're providing that support to other agencies. So we contract with other companies. So we will contract with, what's a big contracting where I can't tip of my tongue, but Northrop Grumman or other companies we will have a contract with. And they were, supply the support to these other agencies. What I do within my current role as a senior data analyst is that I'm reviewing different data from other agencies. I'm looking at their obligations or their spend that they're using to see where can we help them in that market. So we see that, they spend a lot on paper products. We want to come and help them because GSA is not mandatory, and I forgot to mention that. GSA is not mandatory for other agencies to use us, so therefore they can go outside, open market is what we call it, and go straight to Office Max or other companies and do a direct contract with that company without going to us. But we want them to come to us, so that's where I'm just reviewing data to see are there any leverage or opportunities where agencies can use us. So just reviewing data all day.
Okay, cool. Dan, you were unpredictable. Tell us about that.
So I support now and worked for many years for the Military Sealift Command, which owns and operates all of the non-warship ships for the Navy. So they owned and operated about 130 ships on any given day. So the unpredictability part was, coming in, we did casualty repairs and investigations and things like that. So it would be, it's all framed in the kind of naval engineering, marine engineering world, but the specific kind of tasks on a daily basis really depended on what was happening within the agency, within the world, and where we needed to support the different operations that the Navy and the Marine Corps were doing on a given basis. So for me, that was one of the biggest reasons that I made the transition from the private industry to the government. It was... you walk into the office in the morning and you open up your email and you didn't really know necessarily what you were going to have to deal with that day. You had your long-term tasks and your projects that were always there, but there were a lot of things that came up on a regular basis that made the job still very enticing on a daily basis.
Great. Okay. Brock, variety.
So I'm going to answer it a little bit of a different way. I'll just ask everybody here in the room just to think to themselves, if there's something you really like to do, just kind of imagine what that is in your head. There's probably a job in the government that does something very similar. It's one of the biggest employers in the world. There are a ton of different positions. And, you have different things that you like to do. It might not just be one specific thing. Once you're in, you have that flexibility to move around. I think I've had 8 jobs in 8 years, but I've maintained some of them for 3 years at a time. So that gives you an idea. There's a lot of moving parts. I'm doing 2 jobs at once right now. There's a lot of variety. I think just identify what it is that is your strength. What do you really like? And that helps try to get you an idea of where you might fit. Do you like working with people or do you like more staying by yourself? There are jobs for both of those things. And you have the ability to move around in the government to try to figure that out if you don't know right now. So that's how I'd explain it.
Cool. Heather was pathways.
So my word was pathways because my job is all about pathways. Pathways is the student intern / recent graduate program that everyone in the government uses, or most people in the government use. So I was actually hired with DEA to solely hire and support students throughout their career with DEA. So that is what my word is, pathways. That's what I deal with every day.
Okay. Mark, was you life-changing?
Yeah, I cheated a little bit. I did 2 words. For the newcomers, I work in a government program, a federal agency that runs factories inside federal prisons, and it brings work to the inmates where they go and they work and they make products that then are sold to federal government agencies and elsewhere. Our program is truly life-changing. That is no joke. We impact the lives of inmates. We teach them work skills they didn't have. We help them prepare for a successful reentry. That keeps society safe. That keeps that inmate's family safe. That when they get out and they have a plan, they go from being a tax user to a tax-paying, law-abiding citizen, using the skills that they learned with us. Right now we have about 12,000 inmates working in our program in factories all across the country, and every one of those men and women, their life is positively affected by the work that we're doing. And so if that's important to you and what you want to do in your life, you might want to come talk to us after the networking.
And diverse.
So I'm an accountant with the federal government on the government contracting side. So I'll give you 3 short examples of how that's diverse. Right now I'm auditing the Military Retirement Fund, which means that I get to select a sample of different military servicemen and servicewomen and verify that their retirement was calculated correctly and they're receiving the right amount of money from the federal government. That's really important. We want to make sure everybody in the military is getting the right amount of pay. That's something that's important and kind of unique to the federal government. Very recently, in the last couple of years, we were auditing the Department of State, and we got to visit embassies around the world to verify that their embassies are performing the way that they're supposed to, both operationally and financially. We visited Dover Air Force Base, and we got to visit the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System, where they perform autopsies on every single service member that comes home. All of the fallen soldiers go there. So all of this ties into financial audits and financial consulting, and it's all just very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Great. Cool. I like that you explained your words. Thank you very much. I want to go back to the audience. Any other questions not dealing with the security clearance? Yes, in the back.
What's the biggest thing on a student internship application that stands out?
Good question.
It's kind of general, but.
So I know when I review resumes from students, I'm looking for passion, someone who's interesting, who shows they have motivation, where I can teach someone skills specific to the job. I can't teach passion. I can't teach someone who's interesting and fun to be around. And one of the things I think I've learned the most in government and just in the work world, if you're easy to be around and you are not too rigid, you will be very successful because it really comes down to personality and people's willingness to work with you. So if you can show that in a resume, it really doesn't matter what you do. If it seems like you're going to be a good fit, you're going to have a leg up. And I've hired several people from Mason because of that.
Great. So you mentioned about passion, things like that. Sounds a lot like what, the civilian or private sector as well, right? Do you agree? How would you suggest then that our students put together their resume to show that?
So for me, I always ask applicants, what have you been doing? They tell me about their job or a summer camp or whatever they spend their time doing. Why do you like it? Why is it interesting to you? And then what have you done? How do you go out of your way to improve it or provide value? What value do you bring to the world or to this specific activity? If you're just going and attending and having fun, that's great. But in the internship or in an employment situation, it's all about what value you bring to us. And it should also be what value we bring to you. It is a relationship, but we're looking on one side of it for the value you bring in. So if you can show data, how many people do you coordinate with? How many people do you manage? How many dollars do you manage? Anything that you changed, if it started at X and it ended at X plus 2, that's helpful to know. And then what was your direct involvement in that change?
And one thing I want to add is that, and this is just not just for the federal government, but outside, is that with passion is definitely what you bring, but also, and this is what I tell my students, find exactly what you want to do. Where's your strength? Where is your passion to work at? So if you want to work for the federal government, just don't apply to a job like, hey, because they have a position. If it's something like Gia said, that you want to help other agencies meet their goals, or if it's Department of Education because your passion is education, or if it's transportation because you want to help the infrastructure of this country, that's where the passion comes in. That's where I would say is focus on the actual agency, not just the federal government, but kind of narrow it down. Like, what agency do you want to work at? And then that will be your focus.
So last thing I would say is also, when you apply, make sure you attach a cover letter. Because in your cover letter, you can really be passionate about what your experiences are, what you want to get into, why you're applying for that job and why you like that agency.
And in that cover letter, this is the School of Business. That's what you all are studying. But with a lot of times in the federal government, like with my organization, you can apply a lot of those business skills to a federal government job. Accounting, marketing, contracting, advertising, program management, quality management, all those things are needed in our federal agency. And so the skills you've picked up and the interests you have in the School of Business can directly apply. And you take advantage of something like a cover letter to explain the projects you've been in and the things that you studied in your areas of expertise. That would make you pretty interesting to us.
Great. Okay. So I want to move the conversation a little bit to the federal resume. All right. Because I know I speak with a lot of students on that. And my belief from what I've seen is that it's not, you can't just submit one page and expect to go through. What do you think about the federal resume? What can you tell our students? What advice can you give them about that?
You have to think big. Power words. You didn't just do this project. If you worked with the decision makers, you put that in there. The decision makers sought your guidance. If you are working on something in whatever area you're in, you don't want to undersell it, and you don't want to look like you're bragging or that you're exaggerating, but you got to see the value in all your experiences. If you planned something and saw it through, you initiated a project, you did all the project management, you met with the key decision makers, you made sure those project goals were met. The president of whatever looked to you for guidance. You met with the dean of whoever who leads this program. You informed he or she of the progress. These are power words. These give you a better rating as they look over your resume. Don't undersell yourself.
I'd also add that when you go to Pathways or to USA Job and look at Pathways, you'll see all the different write-ups. You want to actually read it and then write your resume to actually address what is in that application posting. If they're talking about finance, you want to know what language they're using. So a lot of these are system reviewed, and it's catching certain buzzwords. So you want to try to get whatever exposure you have in that area, you want to try to get that in your resume. I've also been advised length is better in government. In private sector, you think maybe 1 to 2 pages. In a government resume, you want to show as much as you can. And for where all of you are today, some of the experience may be more limited, and that's fine. So don't forget about volunteer experience or church experience. If you've done something to help an organization, it can be a bake sale or a lemonade stand, you're doing something, you want to include that. And they don't really publicize it, but it will help you in your negotiations. You can get a higher salary with volunteer experience than if you didn't put it on there. And it's all about the hours you're spending in that activity. So don't forget about volunteer work. It's really important, and it's viewed positively in the government.
And I think I just want to add, like I stressed in the beginning, use your resources here at Mason, because I was different because I applied through Mason. So I don't think for you all being an entry level and straight out of college, I honestly, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I do not think the page limit or the page amount is really going to affect you all. It's only when you get to mid-level, senior level, yes, you need more than a 1-page, 2-page. My resume is over 5 pages long, but that's because I have different experience. However, when I applied to my first job in federal government, it was only 1 page, and I obtained that job. So that's what I'm saying. Use your resources here at Mason when there's jobs announcements, when they have workshops, when they have panels. Talk to the people there and try to, network and figure out, the position that way. That would be, because I think what we're trying to say is going to be a case-by-case scenario. That's why I tell my students, you have multiple resumes. You have a general resume, but I have resumes for different jobs that I apply to. So that's why, we're just saying, look at the job, but don't get stuck right now for entry-level positions on the page number.
So I'm going to kind of tell you guys a little bit about the process of what it's like in HR to review all your resumes. And so in HR, like when you guys apply, your resume, if you make it into, okay, let me go back a little bit. Basically, as you apply, you're automatically scored in a system. And then we look at the highest scores. Everyone has to apply, they have to answer questions, and that's how you're scored. So the highest resumes that are in that system, we're looking at, there's somebody out there who was reviewing every single one of your resumes. And from there, what we're looking at is, do you qualify for the job? At the lower levels, the internship levels, it's basically, are you a student and where are you in your education? But at the higher levels, it's, do you qualify? Do you actually meet what's in this job announcement? So I cannot reiterate at all what Brock said. Look at the announcement, read it, and then tailor your resume to every single job you apply for, because it's the only way you're going to be seen and determined qualified in the government. So
the word tailor, too, and to reiterate what Brock said, use some of the words in the announcement in your resume and cover letter. Those words are what the system is searching for. So if it's accounting or, business, whatever it is, you read the announcement and you want to pull those specific keywords out of the announcement and put them somewhere into your resume and cover letter.
That is a great tip.
And not just for government. This is for any jobs you apply to, do it that way.
Cool. Okay, so along with the resume conversation, always comes the question about pay, the pay scale. Usually for students, college students, what would you tell them for a good pay scale? Or should they even be thinking that way?
So years ago when I first started, I did a small recruiting back at my undergrad. I always said, from an engineering perspective, the government starting pay right out of school was less than they could make if they went right into industry, but it overlapped and it surpassed relatively quickly in the engineering kind of government world. I'm sure these guys can talk to that, but it is that's how it works. And you have a little bit of negotiating power, but it's at this level, it's not a massive amount of negotiating power. You're applying for a specific job at a specific grade or within that grade, and you could kind of negotiate a little bit there, but that's kind of where you're going to end up. But if you get the job and you perform, there are pathways to move up on a pretty quick basis.
Yeah, I think the actual pay scale is on. You can just Google it. Generally, I think the theme is it's like you start with a GS or a general schedule, grade 7 or 9, I believe, is how an undergrad typically comes out. It may vary from agency to agency and depending on what area you focus in, but generally you're looking between that 7 and 9. So if you Google that, you'll get the range that it tends to fall in. And then if you have a graduate degree, then that can come in a little bit higher. It just has a varying scale. And then as you go up, you're getting more specialized Then it starts getting into managerial ranks and closer to the executive ranks. I don't know if that helps, but that would give you an actual range. And then if you have private sector offers, that can help with that bargaining power, where you can come in with an actual number and say, hey, I have an offer that's $5,000 more. I'm interested. How can we, is there anything that you can do? And there are things that can happen when that situation occurs that maybe weren't on the table when you first started talking.
In our agency, we between the 7 and the 9 for recent grads, it was based on GPA. So if you had a certain GPA, we offered you a 9. If you had a certain GPA, you got a 7, and there was no kind of getting around that. There was a little wiggle room within each grade, but it was all based on GPA.
So I want to go through the different grades for you guys. The pay scale in the government is grades 1 through 15, and then it goes across. So each grade has 10 steps. So grade 1 is typically high school students. 2 is just graduating high school. 3 is going to be like your freshmen, sophomores, college students. 4 is going to be typically your juniors and seniors. 5 will be your seniors and then graduates. 7 will be those that are graduating with a bachelor's degree with a 3.0 GPA or higher, or a 3.5 in your core classes. And the GS9 is graduate students. And then 11 is PhD.
Great.
And the thing about government jobs is you can get a job that is a 7-9. What does that mean? Well, it means if you start in at a 7, then after a year of successfully doing that job, you move up to a 9. They have 7, 9, 11s. So you can start moving up pretty quickly. And then as Heather said, inside every one of those numbers is another step. So you're a 7-5, and then you're a 9, and then you're an 11-2, 3, 4. And every year, in the first 3 years, I believe it is, you move up a step every year within that grade. So that salary schedule, as some of the other panelists were saying, it starts to build up with the federal government.
So as you guys go through USA Jobs, some of the agencies, my agency actually is changing away from the GS schedule, and they're going into what they call pay banding. So you'll notice some of the job announcements won't have a GS level. So you just have to do some research. So pay banding it's generally the same thing. You're in a pay band. But it's not necessarily your raises and compensation isn't necessarily always tied to time. It's to performance, where some of the GS scales are, you're GS 5, step 1. At that 1 year mark, you get your step increase. So the pay banding is really kind of I like it. It's worked out really well, but it's tied more to performance than it is to time. So again, as you're looking at USA Jobs, there's career ladders, they'll call it, which is, it might be a 7 to 13 career ladder. So you may come in as a 7, but you can work yourself all the way up to a 13. And then there's pay bands. So it'll have a low all the way up to the highest that you can make in that pay band without moving positions.
Great. Okay, so I want to go back to the audience now. What questions do you have for our panelists? It's got to be one question. You've got to have a burning question, because after they leave here today...
Are you all still interested in working in the federal government?
We've got one right here. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, these youngsters could have paid internships.
Mm-hmm.
Paid internships.
So at our agency, the interns are a GS depending on where they are. So you are a GS 4. So you're getting paid by the federal government during your internship.
Right. Yeah, the pathways, that's paid, right? Yeah, okay.
I think more on the keywords. I didn't know that in your cover letter and stuff, it's like a system. You were saying, what sort of keywords are they looking for? I didn't know. It was just kind of cut and dry.
Good question.
So I worked in a budget shop. So if you know what an appropriation is, you probably want to have appropriation. You don't want to throw something in if you don't know what it means, because then you're probably not doing it. But if you need to Google some of them, because they might be quite technical. They're usually specified to the role that you would be applying for. And if if you don't know what it means and you find out, oh, that's just like the budgeting process. Well, I do that in my job all the time. I just don't call it appropriating. You can say the word, and then in the cover letter you can explain, like, I'm not an agency, but I do budgeting for my office. It's just really figuring out what is the semantics behind what they're looking for and tying it back to the stuff that you already do or have had experience doing.
Good.
And a lot of that will be in the specific duties section on USA Jobs. So that's where you would pick up a lot of those things.
Yeah, just keep in mind, they didn't write that job description and the specific duties just by accident. Though they're giving you some of the buzzwords they're looking for. So then you want to tie your work experience and make it match that as much as possible, which is what I meant by don't sell yourself short. Yeah, you did the budget on whatever you did for whatever club you're president of. Now you're administering the appropriations. You've got to speak in their language.
And Anne, I want to ask you, for Kearney & Company, keywords, resumes, what advice
Yeah, that
can you
sounds
give?
really hard, guys. I don't know that you guys would have hired me. So Kearney has a pretty straightforward hiring process. All of our openings are posted on our website. We work with Hire Mason. We come to the career fair. Our college hire students generally have a one-page resume, and you're going to write on there the clubs you've been involved in, the sports that you've played. If you're an accounting student, we'll be looking to see if you have a plan to get to 150 credit hours to get your CPA. And probably we'll look at your GPA. If your GPA is not great, you can leave it off. We might still ask you about it, though. So it doesn't hurt to just be upfront.
Cool. Okay, go ahead.
And I guess I just wanted to, and because I could feel the mood in here, is that if you're looking for an industry where you have great work-life balance benefits, that you're giving back to the country, that you are using your talents and skills, and you'll be able to do it across different agencies, the federal government, you all, is for you. I can't stress it enough that each agency is going to be different. That's why I keep saying utilize the resources that you have. But this information that we're giving you is not to scare you all, but it's definitely just to help you all. But still, if you still think the benefits that we're talking about, the different career moves that you can do, like I said, within my agency, we have a lot of leadership development program. So not only will you finish the internship program, they will help build you to be an excellent leader. So if that's where you think you want to go, apply to the federal government.
All right. So one question, too. I like your point there, Shantae. I want to talk about networking. How can students network with people in the federal government?
So network, not just with the government, just in general, but I think it's helpful for where you are geographically. You're going to be exposed to a lot of people who have government ties. Get business cards and follow up. I am continuously amazed that I say this every time I talk to a group of students, and I hand out business cards, and literally no one says any thank you message or just sends a follow-up. You will differentiate yourself so fast by actually doing it, because you'll be in the 0.001% of people who take the initiative to do it. And when we talk about making a connection with somebody, I just am blown away that people don't do it. So literally think about this. If you're looking for a job, you want them to remember you. So go up and talk, make a connection, and then follow up.
As like Brock just said, this is a geographical area that's full of government employees. You have friends, and they have parents, and they have siblings, and some of them work for the government. Talk to them. Find out what they do, what agency they work in, what kind of work that is, and how you might be able to fit in based on what your interests are. This is a fantastic networking opportunity. When we get done here, there'll be 3 people from Unicor Federal Prison Industries here to talk to you, to network with you, to give you their cards, take your email addresses, keep in touch with you as we have openings and opportunities develop. So you just always are on the lookout, remembering that it's up to you to sell yourself and get your word out there. And you know a lot more people than you may think you do.
So as a student right now, I would say start building your network not only with professionals, but with other students, because those students are going to be professionals in 2 to 4 years. So get involved in your student organizations that you have on campus. There's a lot of them in the School of Business. and start there, and then start building up from there.
I was just going to remind folks, and maybe the folks who didn't hear it, I got my job by networking. I just sent in a resume to a guy at 2 a.m. and then followed up with a phone call. It wasn't that much effort, you know. So like, it seems like a lot. Just like, oh, I don't want to send that email. It's going to mean a lot. You just have to put in something to get something out. And you're still going to have to work hard and like be able to back it up. But it's not a very big task to walk up to someone and say, hi, my name is, you know, I liked talking to you, or I want to hear more. You'll get more information and you'll be surprised. We will remember it. And when an opening comes up, we're going to think, hey, that nice kid from George Mason, you know, is really interesting. I wonder if he'd be interested. And if you followed up, we have your email address. Just keep that in mind.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we are out of time. The next hour, though, I expect you all to stay and to speak with our panelists and to enjoy our wonderful snacks. So let's first thank our panelists for coming. Now, network and enjoy.